Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of Conscious Caregiver Conversations. We'll just wait a minute for Samantha to hop on. Just gonna clear some energy. There's Sam. All right. Got our sage burning. Sage is not really burning. I guess there's not a ton of unconsciousness to clear. Here she comes.
Good morning, good evening.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm in a, always clearing out a lot of throat chakra energy. There's a shadow on my face. I'm just in a new setup because of a new job that I'll be starting. So as long as do you think, Jenna, you can still see me okay? I'll have to get it sorted maybe for next time. I'm not sure there's much I can do about it now.
Yeah, you're okay.
Turn it a little bit. All right, good. I've lost your face, but I can still hear you perfectly. So I don't know why Instagram does that, but that's okay. We will bear with it.
Oh my goodness. That is hilarious. I don't know why that happens to you.
No, I don't either. And I can hear you perfectly. I just have a blank screen above me. But yes, your beautiful voice is always lovely to hear. And I see you at the beginning and I see you at the end. So I'm not sure.
That's bizarre. So, do you want to share about the exciting changes that are happening in your life?
Yes, I can, because as with always, like even when we are faced with a decision, and it's really good to take, like we always talk about, Jenna, taking that intentional time and space, but trying not to overthink it as well, because for those that don't know, Jenna's in a quite C-suite, almost director position in education, and I'm clinical on the floor, with patient care. And I've known that position is not serving me the best, and I'm sort of in it for necessity at the moment. And so I've always kept sort of an eye out for different opportunities. So that's a really good point as well, that if you know something's not serving you and it doesn't feel aligned, and we've talked about what feeling aligned can mean for you, then it's really good to just take that time and be open to different opportunities. And that's kind of what happened. And in the space of 8 days, I went from putting an application in, my resume, my CV, whatever you refer to it as, and I got a call 2 hours later, which in our public system would never happen that quickly. And then, yes, got a pre-interview on the spot, got an interview a few days later, then was requested to do a second interview for a different position that I would be better suited for in this non-government organisation. So it's not a charity, it's not obviously government public system, but it works with government officials, but it's technically non-government organisation. So in primary healthcare, so I'm moving from the acute setting in a clinical-based setting to primary healthcare, of which I have a strong rural background in rural Western Australia, but I don't have a strong primary health background. And this is where my own kind of the work that we do, and in just releasing any expectation, any kind of holding on to a certain outcome, it has just all flowed. And that in itself has been a beautiful experience. And it hasn't come from a place of, oh, I've got to get out of theatre. I need to find another job. I need this to happen. It's really been it's happened quite quickly, but it's been a very flowing process. And even my lovely, like my manager at work, who I thought might kick up a little bit of a, because it's hard to get staff, so I thought he might be a little bit resistant, is so happy for me. And it's a work from home position, or mostly work from home. There's a few meetings I need to go to in our capital city, but it's a work from home position. And so, interestingly, as well, to add another dimension to this, about 2 weeks ago, I was in circle with a beautiful group of local women, and I made my intention very clear to my guides, to source, God, whoever you refer to. And I was like, right, I need to get out of theatre, make this happen, clear a path forward. I want to be on the farm. And look what's happened. Mind you, my ego, I still had to become extremely aware of my ego because, I have little children. As they have interrupted these lives before, I'm like, how am I going to work from home? Financially, it's no worse, but it's no better position for us. So I can't enable my husband to be at home at the moment. So all this ego was coming up as well. But again, I want to try and give it this such a real time, real life example of how doing this inner work and having such awareness, having a village of mentors and trusted colleagues and sisterhood support that is, for me, also outside of nursing as well, that has really enabled a flow through this. And through this, I've still had, life and children and a sick horse and all the things. So I don't want you to think that I'm just sitting on a mountaintop, like just asking for things to happen and they just come. This is very real life, very messy. Sometimes ego thoughts come in, and I actually try to talk myself out of initially even attending the interview. That's how strong some of the ego thoughts and mindsets were. And
Wow.
I've done this work for, how long have we been in Soul Up, Jenna? Like almost 5 years, more than 5 years maybe, because my son's turning 6. So, it's, and so it's a journey. So I just want to share, and that's really an overview of this journey of the last 2 weeks. So I have, yes, created a space in my shed because that's where I have space to work. But again, it's that intention behind it. I've got my beautiful wedding flowers behind me. I have invested in a really ergonomic chair. I've got in front of me I've got incense. I've got my beautiful crystals and cards, because that's for me, one of the beautiful benefits of now working from home, is that I can be in this space where, just because it is a quite an admin based role, it's a planning and strategy role, I can still bring my essence of my divine feminine, my divine masculine, my creative, work into this job. And in fact, into both interviews, I brought in elements. I didn't call it necessarily soul up or spiritual work or coaching work, but I actually had one of the panel members say, I've never heard a question answered like that before, because I'm using my own inner voice, and really a voice that's directed by, if we allow it to be, a voice that's directed by, soul, spirit, God. Anyway, so that's just a little bit, because I know nursing is incredibly hard. And so I'm still in a nursing role, but it's just in obviously a more administrative, planning, strategic. So I would still count that I'm in a nursing role, and it's still going to have stressful moments. And wherever we are, and that's why the work Jenna and I, speak of, and this conscious caregiving, is just not for nurses. but also is for nurses in wherever you are in the world, whatever environment that you nurse in. You can take these principles and these learnings and apply them to real time. So
Yeah.
I've got one more week in
Yeah.
theatre, and then I'll be working from home, sipping my chai.
Yes, sipping your chai. I love it. And you made a couple points that I just want to mention. The first thing that you talked about was, how we need to slow down and be intentional and, get in touch with what's in alignment. And one of the things that I wanted to point out with that is that it really does take us taking time in quiet space and getting to know who we are, because sometimes we're going to encounter resistance because we're stepping through a new portal of power, and that is going to call us to confront our shadow and do some more healing work around that so that we can fully step into who we're meant to be in this next chapter. And other times we encounter resistance because what we are doing or the space that we're in just isn't in alignment anymore. And so having the knowingness and being able to differentiate between what is just trying to sharpen me and fine tune me and make me, this better enhanced, version of myself, because I'm moving up, shall we say, in the world. I'm stepping into my next level. Or what is giving us this feeling of resistance because it's just simply not aligned to who we are anymore. Um, and so it's really important, I've begun in my own practice and in my own life to be able to recognize when information drops in, and I know that it dropped in from a divine source. Like, it was nothing that I was thinking about. It was nothing that, I was cultivating. It just dropped in out of nowhere. And I just felt this deep sense of like, yeah, this is what I should be doing. This is my next step, whatever it might be. And so again, we talk about it so often, but slowing down, being intentional, being in the quiet, is super important. And yesterday I was struggling a little bit with something I was preparing to do, and that kind of leads me to the next point that you brought up, which is the ego. I think it's really important for people to understand, especially if you're just getting started in this consciousness work, that when we think of the term ego, we think of somebody who's super prideful, or somebody who's egotistical, or somebody who, puffs themselves up, or, what have you. And that is certainly an aspect of ego. That aspect of ego actually often points to somebody who doesn't think very highly of themselves, and so they need to puff themselves up to make themselves look better. You know those people, and you can totally like sniff them out. But the other piece of the ego is the part that is designed to keep us safe. And so a lot of times when Sam and I are, talking about different circumstances and we bring up the ego, it's actually that part of our brain that instills fear, instills unworthiness, tells us we're not good enough, tells us that if we take this chance or we take this leap or we take this risk, that, we're going to be unsafe, and, we're going to be unstable. And that is the piece of the ego that I feel like, even though the other piece of the ego, the puffed up piece is totally legitimate and relevant in many circumstances, I feel like in this work, in the consciousness work, in the spiritual healing work, in all the things, we're actually talking about that other piece of the ego, that part of our ego that seeks to protect us from harm, that seeks to protect us from, the bottom falling out underneath us. And so again, it goes back to And this is something, one of my themes this year has been trust and surrender. And they kind of go together because in order to fully surrender, you have to trust, right? And that's why I go back to, really knowing yourself, really getting to know you and, what different circumstances feel like in your body and what that knowingness feels like in your body, because the ego is still going to try and come up and protect you. But when as one of our mentors, Echo, always says, and when you are able to kind of quiet, those voices and quiet those aspects of your ego that want to keep you safe. And for me, I just knew that when I came home yesterday and I was feeling super anxious and concerned about something I was about to step into, because, again, your ego's there to protect you and your mind starts doing all the stories and giving you the worst case scenarios. I knew that I needed to sit down and journal, and I didn't know what was going to come out of it. But I just knew that I needed to sit quietly on my couch and journal out everything that I was thinking, feeling, whatever. And it was really amazing, some of the things that came out in regards to other leaders that I had worked with and their process and their journey and just all of the things. And it was like, it really lightened my heart. And then of course Samantha came in, and this is the beautiful thing about these conversations and having, a soul sister like Samantha, because she just came in and she had the most beautiful thing to say, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. And it was so funny because she started out her message by saying, I'm not really totally sure why I need to say this, but I need to say this. Like, this information just came in and I know that it's for you. And it was like exactly what I needed to hear. And so no coincidences, but yeah, it's just, it's so important when we talk about this work and we start, using some of these terms and some of these processes, that we really begin to understand. And I know I've talked about this before, right? But, somatically, what does this feel like for you? And really getting to know from an emotional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, what do some of these circumstances, the resistance and the ego and all of that, what does it feel like for you, and what are the stories that are coming up? Because then you can start becoming this master of deciphering what is truth and what is just, your ego trying to protect you and stuff like that.
That is all of that, Jenna. And I'm so glad that that message landed, because a big part of, yes, a big part of taking what intuitive hits might come, or what downloads you might get, or what inspiration you might get, is then following through and trusting that it will land as it's meant to. Because I had this fear, but just briefly came in before I said what I said in the message to you, and I was like, I wonder if she's going to be really pissed off with me because it was a very direct message. So it's having that trust, as you touched on in a slightly different aspect. But when you do this work and you start building a trust, it's not an arrogant trust, it's not an ego trust. It's just this trust, and trust that however someone or those around us might react is actually not our problem, if we're coming from that beautiful aligned space. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that a big almost antidote for the thoughts that ego can bring to us is the fact that there really is no wrong decision that we can ever make. If you're open to this work, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to go within and look and see, again, not over analyzing or criticizing or anything like that, but if you're just willing to learn from every point, every experience that you go through, every feeling that you have, then there is no wrong decision that you can make. And for me personally, being someone who's always been so like responsible and, you know, not sort of stepping outside of anything really, for me it's very reassuring, and I can silence those ego thoughts or call them out for what they are by simply saying, well, there is no wrong decision here.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like the best decision at the moment, and that's actually good enough. Like that's good enough.
Absolutely. You either learn or you learn.
Learn.
You either learn
Yeah.
or you learn. So,
Which I think can be very that sorry, that can be very perhaps different, obviously, in certain aspects of healthcare where we're taught, you know, when we do oh my goodness, when we're taught to do, you know, when our medication tests, for example, when we get tested for medication accuracy, it has to be 100% that our graduate RNs pass.
mm-hmm.
And that makes sense. You know, that makes sense. But what I've found, and now doing this work and really looking at my nursing practice, is that so many of these elements that I was taught as a nurse when I was in my young 20s, is when I began nursing, have bled into my personal life. And like we've spoken last week or a few weeks ago about multitasking, because that is seen and almost required in some sense in a nursing capacity. But it then overtook my life, and that was my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always said that you don't practice as a nurse, you become a nurse, because it's such a human connection profession. And to a certain extent, I still believe that. But like for this example, I just allowed that, well, everything must be, you know, there is right or there's wrong, or there's, you know, correct and incorrect, and that could harm someone if I don't get it correct. But that mentality bled throughout my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same when we say slow down. Obviously, in a trauma call, or what we call a MET call here, you will need to hustle and, you know, move quickly, and there will be chaos and that aspect. But really, unless a patient's life is at risk, or, you know, that is a slightly separate area then. For the rest of it, for the rest of our practice, and then for our own personal lives, all of these principles can be applied. There's really only that small time when it's a life or limb situation that certain perhaps anomalies need to be made. But
Mm-hmm.
we've got to really become aware of all of those factors in that small amount of time, then bleeding into the rest of our profession and our lives, because that leads to burnout and a lot more stress, anxiety, depression, all the things.
Absolutely. Well, and let's face it. I mean, obviously, you know, we sign an oath to do no harm. We certainly don't become nurses or healthcare providers with the intent to do harm. But, you know, let's face it, when we are caring for a patient and things didn't quite go the way we planned, how much learning comes from that? I mean, some of the things that I carry into my career over a decade later, some of the things that I will never forget are because something didn't go the way we planned. You know, a perfect example, one of the things that, you know, we got into the habit of doing on one of the open heart units that I worked on was that we would give Toradol down the OG tube before we would fully wake the patient up and extubate them so that we could try and get ahead of the pain, because of course, like, as they're waking up and they're coming out of their anesthesia, they're now feeling pain, and it makes it harder for them to do the breathing trials required to get the ET tube out. And, you know, little did we realize, and in fact, the entire care team didn't realize, that when some of the patients were receiving methylene blue in the OR, And the combination of methylene blue and toradol or ketorolac can cause serotonin syndrome. And it was
Oh,
like,
wow.
fortunately, everything was given appropriately. There wasn't like a medication error. And fortunately, no harm, no real harm came to the patient. But again, sometimes it's like, certainly that was not our intended outcome, and we never intended for this patient to have a reaction. But, then it caused us to do this deep dive, and here we come to find out that the combination of these two medications can cause serotonin syndrome, which was causing his urine output to drop, and he was having blood pressure instability. And, so it's like, and I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. And so in those moments, I have gratitude for the souls who came here to teach us how to be better. Because, you know, I mean, this is a whole nother rabbit hole that we'll have to get into another time. But when you're doing this work and you start to understand soul contracts and that we're all here with a purpose and a mission, you can kind of see, and again, it does not give anybody, this is not giving permission to harm people by any means. But we know we've all encountered those patients throughout our career where we intended to do one thing and the outcome was another. And truly, so many of us learn from those situations, and we can have gratitude for the souls who were willing to be those people to teach us those things, to be our teachers.
Definitely. And that is, I didn't mean to to go down another rabbit hole. That is what we do a little bit in these lives, because it's a live conversation. And I think that would be really important maybe to touch on again in the future, Jenna, like definitely. But yeah, it's just, again, we harp on about it, but it's slowing down and becoming aware and taking those moments to learn and debrief. And that's where having mentors, colleagues, coaches who are aware is so invaluable. Like, it's almost that, I believe, that vital to have at least one trusted, experienced, guiding mentor in your career, that I think we should almost have paid mentors in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously that would maybe attract different sort of people, but I believe it's that much of a role. Like, it's that important in our clinical practice or administrative practice or wherever you are in nursing or healthcare, because we talk about, caregivers, that we can navigate these different situations, because our job is challenging and it's hard, and we deal with human connection and human lives. So none of this work is taking away from any of that. In fact, it's building our capacity to really care better.
Yep.
I believe.
Yep.
Really strongly
Absolutely.
believe.
Absolutely. Like I always
Definitely.
say, if you don't put yourself first, you're putting everybody else last. Because if you really think about it, if you're not firing on all cylinders, you are not giving your patients the care that they deserve. So, and your patients and their families are going to want a nurse who's firing on all cylinders. So we have to take care of ourselves, and this work is what that's all about, so that we can really give our patients the care that they deserve.
Exactly. And actually, I don't know how long we've been going for, Jenna, but I feel like that's a lot we've covered. I was going to start something else, but I'm like, that might go down another rabbit hole.
We
But
are at about the 30-minute
yeah,
mark, and you are right. We have covered a lot
a
and already gone down a
lot
rabbit hole or
again.
two. So,
Yeah, I love that. But yes, should we love and leave our beautiful people that have joined and watching the replay maybe
yes.
for today?
Yes, I think we've covered a lot. And, congratulations to you on your new role and this new
Thank you.
adventure. I'm so excited for you
Yes,
and look forward in, future weeks as you get started in your new role in hearing more about it and sharing what, that transition is
definitely.
like for you and that new experience.
Definitely. It's all a learning curve. And I was, again, the ego came through and said, well, you're not a you're not a clinical bedside nurse. What am I going to have to share on these lives? And I think after, 16 years almost now in healthcare and 12 or however many years as a nurse, and still working in somewhat of a nursing capacity, we're not going to run out of things to be able to share and teach on,
No,
and because we're still learning and we're constantly learning in this journey. So
absolutely.
thank you, beautiful lady, and thank you for everyone that joined as well.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Have a good week.
You too.